In many parts of the nation, Hispanic heritage is celebrated for its deep roots in this country's history, hence the observance of Cinco de Mayo. But did you know, here too lies an interesting story in the Lowcountry. Joining us with more is Dr. Nancy Aguirre, Associate Professor of Latin American History at the Citadel. It's great to have you.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't think a lot of people realize that the Lowcountry has a Latin American history. Tell us a little bit more about this.
Yes, so we can actually trace Latin American history back to the 1500s when the Spaniards arrived on Paris Island. So most people don't know that information. But even through the 1800s, census information includes people with Spanish surnames, people from Mexico, Cuba. So even through the 1800s, early 1900s, we've found small communities, people of Mexican and Cuban descent. Through the 1900s, you start to see more, not just immigrants, but migrants as well, people from Puerto Rico. And I specifically use the term migrants because Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens.
Yes, of course.
So not just immigrants, but migrants as well. From the 1940s through the 60s, the U.S. And Mexico had an agreement known as the Bracedo program, which was a guest worker program. So in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you start to see more Mexican immigrants, and the Latin American population in general starts to grow even more here in the Lowcountry. By the 70s and 80s, we have vibrant Puerto Rican, Cuban, Mexican communities. You have immigrants from South America arriving as well. And really in the last 3 decades, I mean, I have met people from almost every country in Latin America and most of the islands of the Caribbean here in the Lowcountry. So it is a really vibrant and very diverse Latin American, Latino community here.
I have a couple of questions for you. So these are not necessarily interchangeable terms, but when we're talking about Latin American culture and Hispanic heritage, are those one and the same? Are they different, and how so?
So this is actually a topic of debate within our community. Some people don't like the term Hispanic, some prefer Latino. The word Hispanic really became popular in the 80s when the U.S. Census began using that to classify people of Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban descent. And so that's where that term really became commonplace here in the United States. But Hispanic can be a bit problematic because, so is it Spanish heritage? What does it really embody? The word Latino is, some people argue that it's more, it encompasses more.
That's what I was going to say. So it encompasses all of the countries, including Mexico, Central America, and South America, and the islands as well.
Most of them. But for example, Hispanic, when we talk about Hispanic heritage, that excludes Brazil, which was a Portuguese colony rather than a Spanish colony.
Very interesting.
So I think the word Latino is broader, and more people prefer that.
It's so fascinating to kind of dive into the definitions of these things. But if I could also go back to what you were talking about in the very beginning, when the Spaniards brought some of those Latinos to the United States by way of the Atlantic. So what was their impact once in the 1500s? What was their impact here in South Carolina and in the South in general?
Well, so the Spaniards were present in this region for just a few years. They established the colony. They had Florida, St. Augustine. It wasn't heavily populated. Really, where the Spaniards were more active, Cuba, Mexico, what becomes Mexico after independence. So that's where we see more of that activity. New Orleans, the Spaniards had a presence there briefly. And so they had a presence here in the 1500s, but that was about it.
Oh, okay.
16, 17, 1800s, it's not as widespread as you see in other parts of Latin America.
Well, and that also kind of leads into what Cinco de Mayo actually is.
So Cinco de Mayo is often mistaken for Mexican Independence Day. It's actually not. September 16th is Mexican Independence Day. Cinco de Mayo celebrates or commemorates the Battle of Puebla, May 5th, 1862, when Mexican forces defeated French troops who were in the process of invading Mexico. It's actually not a major holiday in Mexico. It's not celebrated widely outside of the state of Puebla. It's more of a Mexican-American tradition holiday, a way of celebrating Mexican heritage here in the United States.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Aguirre, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this really interesting history that I don't think a lot of people were aware about. It's very eye-opening indeed.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. We're back after this.